Welcome, everyone, to the Insurance Perspectives podcast. This is part one of our series on InsuredMine. On today's show, we have Rahim Virani of Texan Insurance
Hey there.
and Tucker Hood of InsuredMine.
Hey, Kenny, great to be here.
Good to have you. Rahim will receive a full introduction in part two. As a sneak peek, just so you know who he is when he chimes into this conversation, Rahim is the president of Texan Insurance, and he has over a decade of experience in the insurance industry. Our focus this week is going to be on Tucker Hood, head of sales at InsuredMine. I have had the pleasure of working closely with the team at InsuredMine for nearly 4+ years, since their early days in engaging with independent agents. Tucker is quickly approaching 3 years at the helm of InsuredMine sales team, during which time he's overseen a really impressive growth at the company. And I've really enjoyed being able to work with him closely on a lot of projects. Not that I don't like working with the CEO of InsuredMine, Roshan, but it was a great relief when Tucker joined, so that there was more people to talk to apart from the engineering side and the owner of the company. It helps make things feel less high stakes, even though I do value and appreciate Tucker a lot. He's a slightly less intimidating individual. And
Sure.
speaking of which, if memory serves me correctly, I'm fairly certain that the first time that Tucker and actually Rahim and I had a chance to meet in person was at the 2021 National HUD Conference in San Diego, California. InsuredMine generously hosted a party that had a live DJ and a karaoke machine, which is where I'm going to stop the story, because if I die of embarrassment, the episode will just end prematurely. So that's going to set our stage for this conversation about InsuredMine. I'd love to start things off, Tucker, by allowing you to give kind of the elevator pitch for what do you guys do for an independent agency?
Yes, Kenny, thank you for the warm introduction. Your memory serves you very well, and probably stops at the right point as well, but did have the pleasure of meeting you both in San Diego about 2 years ago, and I've really enjoyed working with HawkSoft for the better part of 3. So where InsuredMine comes in is, as we've seen, is the agency management system has been the primary piece of technology that's been used in independent agencies for the last 30 to 40 years, right? And it's solved the needs of policy binding, commission, and accounting really well. And then over the years, there's been a great need for a customer platform, a go-to-market platform, sales marketing, however you kind of define it internally, where InsuredMine tends to shine. Everything pipeline management, marketing automation, workflow automation, e-sign, Google reviews. It's a full platform that wraps around the agency management system. So leverages all the data really well, allows you to do what you do really well at HawkSoft on the policy management side. And we become somewhat of that front end for the independent agency.
Fantastic. I appreciate that. And we'll definitely be diving into specifics of that in a moment. HawkSoft, we really believe in the power of a company's story. And so where we like to start with our 5 questions for our partners is, why does InsuredMine exist? Or if you had to kind of look at it a different way, what is the reason that InsuredMine works with independent agencies?
Yeah, great question. And I think goes back to fundamentally, how an independent agency runs its business, right? Again, a lot of times the agency management system is going to be great if you're binding a policy, if you're servicing a policy, if you're working on a policy management thing, right? When it comes to understanding exactly where somebody is in your customer journey, what you need to know about them very quickly, how you should be talking to them based on where they are in a particular sales cycle, where they might be in a renewal, what type of insurance they may have versus another. That's where InsuredMine eats, sleeps, and breathes, is kind of where they are in the customer journey and being able to see that across your entire book of business. I think that's notoriously been hard for agencies, and maybe not something that they've had to focus on in the past, just based on success that they may have. But The reason we exist is to help agencies understand how a customer, how a prospect moves through that journey, meet them where they are, and at the end of the day, impact their bottom line in a positive way based on that understanding.
Hmm. Excellent. And, with that, one of the things that I've always been impressed with InsuredMine is the company's grown a lot, and it still has this focus, but in its initial years, almost all of the growth was in engineering. Very focused on, we're going to be a product first company. We're going to focus
Mhm.
on features and making sure that we meet the needs of an agency. And so you guys have an expansive feature set. Every time we have a conversation, there's some new avenue that you guys are exploring and building out and innovating in. So I would love to know, across that spectrum, what is the one aspect of InsuredMine that really draws in customers and keeps them with you?
Yeah, that's a great question, and a good point. When I came to the organization, I saw a platform that was right for the mid market and enterprise and the insurance agency world, which is a fun place to sell into, and to be able to have kind of that backing to say, hey, we're innovating consistently. We do have robust feature set, and we can meet the needs of a Texan insurance is really fun. So. The number one thing, the bread and butter of our system is pipeline management at the end of the day, right? So, and pipeline can mean a number of things. If you're listening to this podcast and you haven't heard that word before, a pipeline is just a set of different things that are going to happen over a period of time, and that can be across new business for personal lines, employee benefits, commercial. Those can be different processes, right? That can be a pipeline of renewals, right? 120 days out, 90 days out, 60 days, renewed, canceled. That is an example of a pipeline. Service request in, service request assigned, home and auto change, completed. This is an example of a pipeline, right? And being able to understand those stages, I think, is the biggest thing that an agency can do. Because if we don't understand the processes that our employees are going through every day over and over and over again. And by the way, these things happen every time somebody comes into your agency, gets serviced at your agency, renews at your agency. It's really hard to understand, are we doing well? Are we
Mm-hmm.
doing really not well at all, or somewhere in between? And how do I come in and fix these little things? Because, if we're doing something 1,000 times, and then we can increase efficiency by 10%, that may be the difference of 100 new opportunities that we brought on, or 100 renewals that we have now renewed as a business. And I think it really gives the ability to diagnose at the same time as automate. So if we have somebody in a certain stage, we now know, based on that stage, we should be doing X, Y, and Z, some of which maybe a human has to handle, some of which means, hey, I can automate a task, some sort of notification that takes that off the plate of my employee. So it's absolutely an efficiency thing, and it can be some change management. It is a lot of times a different way of approaching things than agencies are used to, working in pipelines, working in sets.
Mm-hmm.
But it really does allow us to really understand where everybody is, and everybody's successful or not successful.
Yeah.
Can
So,
I add
Raheem,
something to that?
please. Yeah, I was just about to ask. Please do.
Yeah, I think Tucker, I think you hit the nail on the head on that. And I think that the differentiator for us was how customizable it is, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just off the top of your head, you were just naming off all these pipelines, and I think that's just the start of it, right? I mean, because you can really create any kind of pipeline that you want. So whatever process that you really want to try to manage, I think you can do within the system to kind of get that standard operating procedure in place. And so that's what's really unique about it from our vantage point is that, if you can kind of dream it up, I think the system is so flexible that you can kind of create that process so that everybody in your organization is kind of doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can hold people accountable to that process. And I think that's, in today's market, I think that's a really big challenge is that the activity has gone up. There's a lot more involvement on personal line side, on the commercial line side. So you've got to be able to find a way to kind of streamline things, not have to worry and check up on that individual to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to. If your
Yeah.
system allows you to kind of automate that and know that if they just do what they're supposed to within the system, it just does it, then I think it just makes that manager's job, that supervisor's job a lot easier to know, hey, I see that they're doing this. I can see the activity. I can track that. I think the reporting side of that system is just so important and so vital to like an agency's success moving forward.
That's fantastic. And we're absolutely going to dive into that in part 2 of this to get more of your perspective on that. But I appreciate you chiming in there, because I think you can build all the best tools in the world. If an agency doesn't attach to them and implement them, it won't make the difference. But it definitely sounds like that customization, and then that pipeline management. And Tucker, you've been very consistent about this, because we talk about this all the time. Kind of like insurance agents, insurance technology people, we cannot avoid discussing. We'll be at a bar and we'll just end up talking about pipelines and workflows and back end services, and bartenders will just look at us like, please leave. But
we know how to have fun.
Exactly. You mentioned, okay, so I'm gonna politely rib Tucker a little. This is some behind the scenes things. Tucker has you describe yourself as a coach player. You're head of sales at InsuredMine. You also do a lot of that hands-on work there, and so you're a busy guy. You were slightly late for this recording. It's not a problem because we booked extra time, but it gave Raheem and I a chance to talk about the next question. And so I'm going to make you sweat a little, because Raheem mentioned accountability. And so the next question we always ask is about data ownership. And it is a key focus for HawkSoft as a company, HawkSoft's advocacy for independent agencies. Our position is that, we're a steward of data, and we house that data and we protect it, but it's the agencies at the end of the day. So I would love to know, how does InsuredMine approach data ownership with regards to your customers?
Yes, Kenny, feel free to rip on me at any given time. I was late, not just twiddling my thumbs, but actually doing something. So greatly appreciate that tease either way. But so how does, at the end of the day, our customers own our data, or own their data, right? The data that lives in the platform. So we have an expansive privacy policy. Happy to share that with anybody. We are SOC 2 compliant. And we treat that very, very seriously. We run our business on AWS, which we feel is highly secure. But at the end of the day, it's your data. If you ever choose to say, hey, arrivederci or goodbye, you would have the rights to your own data. We would destroy it in 30 days or quicker if you so choose. So, we believe that that's how we should run things, and we find agencies agree with that. So we are pretty cut and dry on how we approach things.
And I appreciate that. Now, I've never been able to ask this before, but technically speaking, Dr. Varani, Doctor of Law, do you agree with that perspective, having reviewed their terms?
I do. Yeah, actually, I was just refreshing my memory on it in anticipation of this podcast, and it does clearly state that in the contract that we own our own customer data. So I agree.
Perfect.
And please don't ever call me a doctor again.
I can respect it. It was right there, and I knew that I could just. It's a little. There's so much fun we get to have in this industry. The relationships that we get to build, and I'm not just wearing this hat because it's a great hat. I'm in Oregon. I'm not a Beavers fan. I'm not a big fan of orange, but I do proudly wear this InsuredMine hat periodically when I'm out and about, sometimes on the golf course. And so we do enjoy having fun with each other, because it is a great relationship. And I think if you can't have fun while you're doing this stuff, why do it? Which brings us, I got to work on my segues to these questions, but the next piece, this is where our podcast is meant to be an open dialogue between technology providers and agencies. because we feel that that is kind of the best way to, as a technology company, it's the best way for us to grow, is to have those honest, open communications. And so, Tucker, this is your opportunity to provide some perspective to independent agents, potentially about what could be better, or what is a challenge. So the question I have for you is, what is the hardest part of working with insurance agencies?
Oh boy, it sounds like we're being really honest on
Where do
this
you
one.
start?
So I might hurt some feelings. So I'll kind of bring it to a positive note, but I think the biggest challenge with the independent agency world is, change is difficult. I started my sales career about 9 years ago, and I came out of college and I was selling to, my territory was San Francisco, and a 100-mile radius of San Francisco. So my clients included Snowflake Computing that I started working with, Upwork, Fortinet, and if Snowflake is the largest software IPO of all time, right? So these guys were at the front end technology of anything that people were doing to try and market in a new way. They were doing. And I got used to this fast-paced software selling to SaaS nature. Rasha and I got hooked up about 3 years ago, and he said, come sell to independent agencies. And I said, that sounds really fun. And I realized, a lot of the agencies may be still operating in the way of the year that I was born. As it relates to some of the agencies some of the companies that I was selling into high tech San Francisco. So I think the largest challenge is just change management. It's getting people to think in a different way than they have, and sharing, not in a obtrusive way, not in a like, hey, I'm trying to scare you way, but that if you don't change, it's going to play a material impact on your ability to continue to grow. So I think finding that balance of, hey, I'm trying to help you, with, hey, you got to do this. You've got to make changes. You've got to become more efficient. I know you see that the checks are coming in, but do you understand how your business is growing? Do you understand why or if things may not be the same way in 12 to 18 months? So I think that's the big thing. What I've found, though, is it is a relationship driven business, which helps a lot once you get into conversations like this, Kenny. So I think people are a lot more receptive once we get into partnerships with a HawkSoft. I know, Raheem and Roshan know each other well. I think, that helps with the change, helps smooth things over, because at the end of the day, you don't want to work with just a software company. You want to work with a partner, and that's what agencies are looking for, because it's hard to change, right? And they want somebody that they can trust to do that with. So I think there is a positive to it.
Sure.
It's so interesting you said trust there, because for an entire industry that's built on trust, I think insurance agents are very untrusting, because I think we've been burned so many times in the past with unbroken promises or broken promises and things like that. So it just takes longer, I think. I mean, I think Roshan and I probably talked a good, I don't know, 6 months before I was like, okay, I think it's time for me to make a move or do something. So yeah, I think it's just it's hard to commit to something because you just don't know, right? And I think, I mean, insurance is the same thing. You're signing a piece of paper that, you're getting a piece of paper that's a contract or a promise to be there when something goes wrong. And so you think we'd be a little bit more understanding of that in terms of getting new technology and things, but I think for a lot of us, it's still a big hurdle to jump.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for agents that really struggle with change? Because I imagine from my perspective, the more an agency is exposed to change, and the more kind of reaffirming experience they have where, okay, you took your 6 months to talk to InsuredMine, but then once you started using it, you're like, oh, okay, this works. That kind of helps. But how would you advise an agent to like get over that initial hurdle?
I think the main thing is talk to other agents, right? I mean, I think
Mm-hmm.
for people that you know, it's a very community-based industry. So I think you keep talking to other folks and seeing what they're doing, and I think that makes agents feel really good about the move that they need to make.
Mm-hmm.
So I think testimonials are really important. I mean, we all love looking at Google reviews and reading the reviews and things like that. So I think talking to folks is probably the main thing, and then really understanding your team's pain points,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing if they see something that is out there that they would be willing to look at. I think that's where we've gotten some of our best ideas and some of our best innovation is just talking to people that are at the ground level and doing the work day in and day out and saying, okay, well, why is this so hard? I'm like, yeah, it's a good point. Why is that so hard? And then you start finding out stuff. And I think that's just I, I don't know any other easier way than that,
Yeah.
honestly.
That makes
I
total
think
sense.
that's a wonderful point, Raheem. At the end of the day, InsuredMine is a vehicle, right? Can you imagine driving, a vehicle anywhere across the country with no map? So I think talking to other agents, I think the biggest thing you need to understand as an agency before you make any changes, what are you trying to change? What does that customer journey look like? I think that's something Texan had a great idea of. They'd already tried another system, Salesforce, where they had kind of mapped out the customer journey. They knew what they wanted to happen. They knew what they wanted to change. And that's something that anybody listening to this podcast, take your sales process, your customer process from the time a lead comes in, the time that shows intent to buy, the time it binds, the time it renews, and break those down into segments and say, hey, here's what should happen. Here is what is happening. Because if not, you're driving across the country with no map. You have a vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't know where you're going, right? You don't know this highway connects to this highway. You don't know that certain things need to happen in certain places, and that becomes really difficult because tech is not a silver bullet at all. It is a
Mm-hmm.
vehicle to help you get where you need to go. But I mean, you gotta have some coordinates, and you've got to have a
Yeah.
path there.
I really appreciate that perspective.
Yeah, I think when you talk a map, it's basically just defining your process, right? And I think a lot of times um, everyone feels like, oh, well, there isn't a set process because every situation is different. Or, oh, well, yeah, we treat our clients very differently, or we treat each client uniquely. And I think when you kind of peel back the onion a few times, you start seeing a lot more similarities than you do differences. There's always going to
Mm-hmm.
be those one-off situations that exist, but I would say, if you can look at 100 instances of something and 90% of the time it's the same, well, there you go. Like that's your process. That's what you want to see happen. If that's what you want to see happen, like make your technology work inside of that 90% of the time. If you're trying to fit it to 100% of the time, you're going to keep spinning your wheels. I think that was a big challenge for us is to, get everybody comfortable with those. Hey, like it's not going to fit every
Yeah.
single instance, but are we going to be more efficient by defining it for the 90% of the time? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
So, trying to get everybody on, I think the change management side of that is really important to say, hey, we heard everybody's voices. We wanted to see everything look the same, but ultimately, like, this is the process. This is what we're going to move forward with. And then when we'll deal with those one-off situations when they come up, it's never going to be
Yeah.
perfect.
Absolutely. So now it's kind of we asked about the hardest part, and then we come up on an upswing with our last question for Tucker. What do you think is the best part of working with insurance agencies?
Oh man, it's entertaining for one. I think as I mentioned, they're relationship folks for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Raheem's a guy that I not only can talk tech with, but talk about life with, talk about golf with, talk about make jokes with. I think that's uh, at the end of the day, we all work really hard, and to be able to have a relationship with your customers and truly get to know them, I think is something special outside of just like a transactional. Hey, we do business together. So I do appreciate that. There's a lot of times where I hop on calls and there are obscure jokes, witty humor, which is my cup of tea. So it is fun to be able to do that. And there's a lot of net new opportunity. And what I mean by that is I may talk to an agency that has never seen, a CRM or one that's integrated to an agency management system. And some of the things that we do are kind of mind blowing for them. So to be able to, it's like, giving a kid candy for the first time, to be able to see that kind of wow, alongside, that personal relationship that you may start to develop is makes the job fun.
Fantastic. And I couldn't agree more. I've said this before on this podcast, but if I had looked at my 25-year-old self and said, you're going to have friends in Texas and in Ohio, of all places, and they're going to be insurance agents, I'd be like, what? Who? And it's surprising. And I think that it is kind of the best part about this industry is the people in it. And because everyone's doing a necessary service, everyone's protecting communities. But the way they choose to do it, I think, is very people focused. They don't abstract out. They know who their customers are. And so completely agree with that perspective. We like to conclude the partner side by tantalizing folks to tune in next time, where we're going to explore how Texas Insurance actually uses InsuredMine. And we'd like to kind of close on the question of, how does InsuredMine work with HawkSoft? In my role as HawkSoft's Director of Partner Integrations, I can attest that InsuredMine is a two-way API partner with HawkSoft, which means they read data out of our system, and then they can write back log notes, activity notes to HawkSoft. But Raheem, Tucker, is there anything else that you'd like to add about how InsuredMine works with HawkSoft?
Tucker, you go ahead first.
Yeah, so the way you started the call was talking about, how we did some karaoke together in San Diego. And in fact, the karaoke song, if I'm not mistaken, and I know I'm not actually, that HawkSoft employees picked was "We Are Family," and there was like 20, 25 HawkSoft. And so, we've developed a relationship over time with HawkSoft. I think, any customer of HawkSoft is going to have a relationship with HawkSoft teams. And, we try and do that. It's sometimes a little ugly. Sometimes it's happy all the time with family, but pretty tight knit. I think as far as we can push the technology, we try to push the technology together and then service clients collectively. So, we try and work as a family as much as possible, albeit sometimes not as rosy as others, but we always make it through and try and do the best we can with what we got.
Absolutely. And I think the best relationships push each other to be better. And there's definitely been, I don't think there's a development team that moves faster than InsuredMine. And so it's always been good to be pushed in that direction of being like, hey, as a technology company, you can move faster, you can do things faster, more efficiently. I should probably phrase this question better. Less about the existential, how do we do business together? More about the nuts and bolts of what functionality does integration with HawkSoft enable?
Yeah, so when you think about what's done where, policy management should be done in HawkSoft, and InsuredMine is going to pull down that policy level information into InsuredMine. So any policies that you bind, any updates that you make will reflect that in InsuredMine. Contact and account information you can update in either system. As of the APIs right now, you would start in HawkSoft. With HawkSoft 6, you won't need to do that, but typically you can update contact and account information in one system, updates in the other. We pull down policy information from the agency management system, HawkSoft.
Excellent. And we will dive more into detail on this in part 2. I'd like to thank everybody for listening to today's podcast. Thank you, Tucker, and thank you, Raheem, for being part of this conversation. For the best way to contact today's guests, click the episode description or episode notes if you're at Apple Podcasts. We appreciate you listening and hope you join us next week on the Insurance Perspectives podcast for part 2 with InsuredMine. Thank you for watching today's episode. Click the video description below to learn more about our guests and to view the latest podcast episode as well as other content from HawkSoft. We appreciate you watching and hope you join us next time on the Insurance Perspectives podcast. Thank you.